Hello, it's Giant 1400, and this is going to be the first episode of Why I Love RWBY. Now, in this series, I'm going to talk about episodes and scenes, or even characters and why I personally love them in the show RWBY. For this first episode, I would like to talk about one of my favorite episodes. In fact, it's my second favorite episode right now, and that is in Volume 3, Chapter 9, is it? No, Chapter 7. It's called the Beginning of the End. In this episode, it's basically how Cinder recruited Emerald and Mercury and how she started off her plans. When I first watched this episode, I actually didn't like it that much. And the reason I didn't like it so much the first time I watched it, because it deviated away from the plot of Yang getting in trouble for basically punching Mercury's leg, even though she thought he was attacking him and she was actually just being fooled by Emerald. Anyway, that being aside, this episode did something that no other episode in RWBY actually does, and it has this black screen with some of the characters talking, and you get an idea of what these characters are. Emerald, Mercury, Cinder, a little bit of Torchwick, I think Adam, and you don't really hear Salem talk, but you hear Cinder talk to Salem, and you kind of get an idea what these characters are just from their tone of their voice, or the way they're talking and what they're saying. And these scenes that have this black screen with these characters talking are done in between kind of the main scenes of the episode, and it creates this ominous feel about oh, these are the villains and this is how they kind of got to where they are right now. That's why it's called Beginning of the End. It's really the start of Cinder's end game in Beacon. It also has a really good scene with Cinder recruiting Emerald, and it's our first hint that Emerald really isn't an evil character. She's just someone who basically didn't know where her next meal was, and Cinder's going to provide all the meals she ever needs. So she was basically just stealing because she kind of had no other choice, if you will. She did have a choice, but she basically isn't as evil as Cinder is, and she's just basically following Cinder because Cinder provided her way out from her poor life, if you will. We also get the scene where Mercury gets recruited by Emerald, and Mercury ends up basically killing his father. His father was a pretty bad guy. There's basically, in this episode, there's a lot of stuff that's said that really relates to these characters, and a lot of stuff that's really unsaid, that's just really seen, or just the expression of their tone that you can infer about these characters more. It's more this episode applies more than what it directly states, and it does it in such a great way. It was one of the most creative episodes, probably the most creative episode in all of RWBY, in terms of the episode structure and how it was presented. And I really do wish RWBY would actually take this chance a little more. This episode also has the first fight with a full-fledged maiden, and we kind of get to see how powerful a maiden is in this episode, which leads it down the line to the end of the volume, where Cinder fights Osmond, and then she also fights Priya as well. I mean, basically, in this episode, in a very creative way, has the tone of an ominous episode, and it also sets up a lot of things for the Volume 3 finale, along with stuff later on that's probably hasn't even been done yet in later volumes, particularly dealing with Emerald not being a evil character, and just kind of the way Cinder recruited Adam, Emerald, and Mercury. This is just a very creative episode, and one that I do wish they would have done more episodes like this in the future and in the past, and I wish they would do more episodes like this in the future. This creative style that's has an episode structure very different, instead of a very linear. Well, this episode is very linear, but it breaks up into these parts of that dark screen, and having the characters talk, and you actually learn a ton about the characters and ton is applied. I just think it was a great episode overall, and that's kind of why I love RWBY Volume 3, Episode 7, Beginning of the End. Anyway, so that's it for today's episode of Why I Love RWBY. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.